We're good. We're good. Am I up there also? Do we need to separate you two? Jordan, just take pictures so we have proof. All righty. We are, to Debbie's deep pleasure, just for you. If you only knew how many other times I wanted to wear a bow tie, but you weren't here, so I said, nah. But no, we are finally beginning a new book study for a season ahead of us as we begin to think about the book of Numbers. Yet another Old Testament book, big book, important book to the Jewish people, but often overlooked by Christians. Partly because it's just big, partly we don't understand its relevance to us, partly because the name scares us away. And so we're going to look at several things tonight, kind of the background real quick, and then begin to work our way through chapter 1. And you'll notice we're getting all the way through chapter 1 tonight. Debbie asked months ago when she knew we were going to do Numbers, she goes, I can't wait to see what you're going to do with some of this stuff. We're going to go over it like an SR-72 flying over Russia during the Cold War. There it goes. So let's do a little background work. Just kind of set us up for what's going on in the book overall, some big ideas. Now, according to Jesus, Moses is the author of the book of Numbers. He brings us up, for example, the book of Luke. He says, the law of Moses and the prophets testify about me. Jesus believed that the Pentateuch, all 5 books, were from Moses. The reason I bring that up is the book of Numbers itself does not claim authorship. And none of the 5 books does it explicitly say Moses is the author. There are places we can go, that had to be Moses, because God said it and Moses wrote it down. But in other places, we know that God is talking to Moses, for example, but it didn't say that Moses wrote it down. It could have been somebody else. But Christ clarifies this one for us, even though skeptics and liberals would argue it's not Moses for various motives beyond that which we want to talk about tonight. But we're going to go with Moses as the author again. Now, assuming that early date for the Exodus, so going back a couple book studies now, and by early date I mean sometime in the 1400s, somewhere between 1490-ish BC, 1450-ish, give or take a little bit, depending on the pharaohs sequencing there in Egyptian history. Assuming that early date for the Exodus, rather than the later date in the 1200s, the stories that we're about to study take place in the 15th century BC. I personally put the Exodus somewhere around 1450, 1445. That puts these stories between 1445 and 1405. The book is literally going to cover a 40-year span or so and no more. The book begins like a travel log while the people are still at Sinai. And a good chunk of the book, like the first 9.5, 10 chapters, takes place at the foot of Mount Sinai. Then we follow this journey, this long journey, and it's going to be the eastern side of the Jordan River is where the book is going to end. And so they've finally arrived at the edge of the promised land as the book ends, which then sets us up for, at some point in the future, the book of Deuteronomy. So it's a travel log, sort of. And I'll show you what I mean when we get a little further down the road in the months ahead. Like I said, the name of the book freaks some people out. Numbers, boring, math, whatever. And they try to get through chapter 1 and they see all those numbers and they quit. And they miss a huge point of what's actually going on in the book. The reason we call it Numbers in English is the title is drawn from the Septuagint, the Greek translation. In fact, the Greek translation calls it the arithmoi. From our word we get arithmetic. It's the arithmoi. It's the numbers of the people who are being counted as the chapter begins. The Latin Vulgate, the Catholic Bible from around 400 to 1960s, also called it Numbers, picking up from the same thing. So, for example, our King James only friends, and this is not if you like King James, more power to you, glad you like it, keep reading. But the King James only folks talk about the superiority of the King James Bible, and it's the only real authorized translation. They're getting their name of the book from a translation. Because what did the King James folks do a lot of? Translated translations to get here. They didn't go all the way back to the Greek. They referenced it when they could, or the Hebrew, but by and large, they're using what's called the Textus Receptus, the text that's been received. How's it been received? Through the church, to the Latin Vulgate, going back to the Septuagint, and so forth. I think the better name for the book comes from the Hebrew. I think the Hebrew name is better. It's more indicative of what the book is talking about. There in the Hebrew, in the Tanakh, the Hebrew understanding of what we call the Old Testament, the name of this book is In the Desert. In the desert, thus the picture at the top of the page in your handout. Because much of the book, 2/3 of it, takes place where? In the desert. Some Hebrew translations in the rabbinic tradition call this book The Lord Spoke. Why? Because that's the first words in the Hebrew text. But I like In the Desert because I think it's more indicative of the whole idea of this journey that we're following. As we do this, keep in mind that we're following along in this book. And essentially what Moses is doing, there's no blanks on the handout because I had no idea how long the handout was going to go when I first started putting this together the other day. Moses, remember all the way back when we did Genesis, years ago now, Moses, when he's about ready to start a new major event in one of his books, always does what? He does it throughout Genesis. He does it at the end of Genesis. Now we're jumping forward. How's he going to begin this book? With essentially what is a genealogy. He doesn't call it a genealogy here, but what's he going to do? Go through all of Jacob's children. And then later on, when we get more numbers, you're going to see more of the same. So Moses is setting us up as the reader for something major is about to happen, just like he did in the book of Genesis. That said, let's go ahead and look in our Bibles then at the biblical text. We'll go ahead and read this first paragraph, work our way through it, and we'll kind of work our way down through the entire chapter tonight. So, chapter 1, verse 1. The Lord spoke to Moses in the wilderness. See, there's the in the wilderness of Sinai. In the tent of meeting on the first day of the second month in the second year after they had come out of the land of Egypt, saying, take a census of all the congregation of the people of Israel, by clans, by fathers' houses, according to the number of names, every male head by head. From 20 years old and upward, all in Israel who are able to go to war, you and Aaron shall list them, company by company. And there shall be with you a man from each tribe, each man being the head of the house of his fathers. And these are the names of the men who shall assist you. From Reuben, Eliezer, the son of Shedeur. From Simeon, Shalumiel, there you go, the son of Zerodashai. From Judah, Nason, the son of Amminadab. From Issachar, Nathaniel, the son of Zuar. From Zebulun, Eliab, the son of Helon. From the sons of Joseph, from Ephraim, Elishama, the son of Ammihud. And from Manasseh, Gamaliel, the son of Pedazar. From Benjamin, Abidan, almost at Aden, Abidan, the son of Gideoni. From Dan, Ahiezer, the son of Ammishaddai, hopefully somewhere close. From Asher, Pagiel, the son of Okran. From Gad, Eliasaph, the son of Duel. From Naphtali, Ahira, the son of Enan. These were the ones chosen from the congregation, the chiefs of their ancestral tribes, the heads of the clans of Israel. So hopefully you heard all three potential names, the Greek, the Hebrew, and the other Hebrew alternative in those first 2 or 3 verses. That's where they're trying to find the name from. But I think for us as we begin the book, and this is why Moses starts the way he does, the key to the book is going to be the Lord spoke. Right? This is not Moses' commandments. This is not Moses' ideas, his laws. These are coming from the Lord. Just like we saw when we did the book of Leviticus. God made commands about sacrifices. They proceeded to do them exactly like they were supposed to. Go back to Exodus. God gave them specific plans for the tabernacle and the ark. And what did they do? They followed him exactly. The picture is, to this point in the storyline, the people are being obedient, more or less, trying to be as precise as they can to be what God has commanded. So God spoke to them. And according to verse 1, God is speaking to Moses at the tabernacle or at the tent of meeting. This is where Moses went to speak with God. Reason being, we were transitioning at this point from the top of Mount Sinai to the tabernacle, which is now assembled and in functioning. And this is what's going to go with them on the journey. And so this is where God is going to communicate with Moses along the way. Currently, we're at the base of Mount Sinai still. So half of the book of Exodus, all the book of Leviticus, and roughly a third of the book of Numbers all take place there at the bottom of Mount Sinai. Moses gives us some historical context now for it as well. Verse 1 says this is taking place 13 months after the Exodus. So these are long books because it's a long time. There's a lot been going on from the time they left to the time they got to Mount Sinai, to the time that God gave them the Ten Commandments, to the time that they obeyed, got all the pieces created and built, and now here we are 13 months into the storyline. And so before they leave, this is really a time of preparation. God is preparing them for this journey. All these first 9, 10 chapters is all about preparation for the journey. They can't just pack up and go. They've got to get ready for the going. And so the first step in this preparation is they need to take a census. Moses needs to get a head count. And specifically what he is to get the head count of are the men who are to be counted according to their clans, tribes, whatever word you want to use there. Moses uses several, by their companies, all kinds of words he uses to communicate the same idea. But he wants to know how many men there are by tribal group. Verse 3 gets even more specific, though. What we're looking for is all the men over the age of 20 are to be counted. Now, 20 is not an age of accountability. All right? We love that language in the Baptist Church. What's the age of accountability? Well, if you think there's an age of accountability in the Old Testament, it's 20 years old. What are they expecting by the age of 20? Not for you to be accountable, to be what? Soldiers. They're expecting you to be out of your mom and dad's house, to be viable adults. My world, Chris's world, a couple days a week at CSU, we got 25-year-olds who act like they're still 15-year-olds. The idea of them getting married would freak them out. You want me to do what? Well, first of all, I want you to pass my class. Then I want you to graduate. Then I want you to get a real job. And then find a wife. And grow up. And they look at you and go, I don't know if I can do that. And I'm going, you're right. By the way, did you see the naming of the newest saint? You know, with the death of the Pope. Newest saint in the Catholic Church was a 15-year-old. And if you're like me, you go, don't you have to have miracles attributed to your name to be a saint? The answer is yes. They did the research, claimed to have found 2 miracles attributed to him. Both cases where he prayed for somebody who was healed. And so he gets the credit for the miracle, so to speak. That's neither here nor there. 20 years old, he wants an accurate count of the number of warriors, soldiers, whatever word you want to use there if you haven't already. Because as they get ready to move forward into the promised land that's already occupied, and they're going to have to fight for it, even though God has already told them, I want to give it to you. When they get there, what do they need in their own heads? They need to be convinced we can win. Right? Think of poor Gideon in the book of Judges. Gideon, raise up an army. Gideon gets 30,000 guys, and God says, too many. I think part of that is to show Gideon how little faith he had because the whole, the fleece and whatnot. But it's so they have an idea of how many combatants they can actually field when the time comes. To do this head count, verse 4 specifies first that there's going to be a man from each tribe who's going to assist Moses in counting his tribe. So there's accountability. I'm going to have you do it with me so you can't complain I did it wrong. And then he gives the names of those individuals that God has already picked. These are already the ones who are the tribal leaders. God gives the names of these men to Moses from chapter 1, verses 8 through 15. We're not going to go through and rewrite all those down. They're there, you can see. Verse 16, as he wraps up this first part of this, points out, though, who are these men? Not only are they from the tribes, who are they? They're the leaders. They're the chiefs. So if you got a problem that I'm sending you to war, talk to your dad or your grandfather. So all kinds of accountability built into this. Verses 17 through 19 then, let's read it. Moses and Aaron took these men who had been named, and on the first day of the second month, they assembled the whole congregation together, who registered themselves by clans, by fathers' houses, according to the number of names from 20 years old and upward, head by head, as the Lord commanded Moses. So he listed them in the wilderness of Sinai. And so on the handout there, I just got one blank for verses 17 and 19. Moses and Aaron fulfilled God's command, obeyed it, completed the task. When? That day. They didn't wait. They sent the chiefs out to get their people, to get the probably family representatives, had them show up. Yeah, this is so-and-so's family. I'm the son of such and such. I got 10 children, 4 men, name, or over the age of 20. And so the point is instantaneous obedience. We're not going to read every word between now and verse 20 all the way down to verse 44. But let's read one of these paragraphs to kind of set us up for how Moses is telling the story of this head count. We'll start with verse 20 and 21. The people of Reuben, Israel's firstborn, their generations, by their clans, by their fathers' houses, according to the numbers of names, head by head, every male from 20 years old and upward, all who were able to go to war, those listed of the tribe of Reuben were 46,500. Now, part of what he's doing here is he's getting the head count. Part of what he's doing here is illustrating Moses' obedience again. He's doing exactly what God told him to do. All the men by clan over 20 and so forth. As he does it, as he walks through these tribal groups, the head count follows the birth order of Jacob's sons. First by his wives, Leah, then Rachel, and then by the maidservants, which would have been the legal norm in this ancient day. Sons of the wives come first, in terms of priority, in terms of closest to the father, inheritance, whole 9 yards, then the sons of the various maidservants. And so that's how this list goes. It's not birth order according to when we read it in Genesis, this one and then this one. It's by wife, by maidservant. The other thing to note about this list of families and tribes is that Joseph's sons replace Joseph and Aaron in the list. So this list is not the actual 12 sons of Jacob completely. Joseph is gone. His 2 sons take the place. One takes the place of Dad, one will take the place of Aaron, which has not even been specified yet in the text. But if you're paying attention, you're going to go, wait a minute, those aren't sons of Jacob, those are sons of Joseph. All this goes back to Genesis at the end when Jacob blesses his children before he dies, he blesses Joseph's 2 sons. And so you're either with 13 or 14, the 12 boys plus these 2, or this substitution that's going on. So from this point forward in the Bible, when you see a list of the sons, the tribes, always pay attention. Is it the actual original list of the 12 sons? Is it the list of the 12 sons minus Joseph and Aaron plus Manasseh and Ephraim? Or is it another list? Because what you'll encounter in various places are different ways of listing the children. For example, go look at Revelation chapter 7, where it talks about the 144,000. It lists 144,000 according to the descendants of Jacob, but it's not the normal list from Genesis either. And so part of our job as a reader is to ask, why did he do that? Why are they doing this? What's being communicated? And so we're following the list with those variations. And then after repeating verbatim the qualifications, who's being counted and how, each tribe's male population, albeit over the age of 20, is given. Otherwise, there's a formula here. The name, the qualifications, and then the number. Now again, we could talk about all 12, we could repeat all the numbers. Don't need to do that. It is worth noting that it is Judah that's the largest tribe, which will play out when we get to the book of Joshua, because Judah will get the largest land inheritance in the Holy Land. And I thought interesting, for no other reason than it was the exact opposite, the smallest tribe is the tribe of Manasseh, which is all the more interesting because if you remember from the book of Joshua, when they went into the Holy Land, half the tribe of Manasseh refused to go into the Holy Land. So you already got the smallest tribe, and half of them don't want to go. They want to stay in the plains of Moab outside the land. So that's what we're doing through all those 12 groups. No need to repeat all that verbatim. Let's look at verse 44. We'll do 44 through 46 just to get the last paragraph of this first section. These are those who were listed, whom Moses and Aaron listed with the help of the chiefs of Israel. 12 men, each representing his father's house. So all those listed of the people of Israel, by their father's house, from 20 years old and upward, every male able to go to war in Israel, all those listed were 603,550. So yet again, for the 13th verse in a row, Moses recounts verbatim what he's doing and how he did it, all I think to highlight the obedience of Moses, Aaron, and the 12 leaders. God said it, and they did it precisely that way all the way through the tribes. 603,550, according to verses 45 and 46. Now, for those who are curious, based on mathematic formulas, if you got this number of men over the age of 20, you got a certain number who's going to be under the age of 20, males, and then you got all the females. The estimate is by most New Testament or Old Testament scholars, the population at this point, a year into the exile or into the Exodus, is probably near 2 million people now. So they've increased in size by several 100,000 in 13 months. So a rather fertile group of people who are being fruitful and multiplying per God's command in Genesis chapter 1. So we've got our numbers. And people go, I don't want to read a bunch of numbers. It's not about the numbers. It's about obedience. Are they doing what God commands? Yes, you remain in the presence of God. No, things go poorly. The last paragraph in chapter 1 begins to answer why were Aaron's sons not mentioned above, or Aaron's tribe. Verse 47. But the Levites were not listed along with them by their ancestral tribe. For the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, only the tribe of Levi you shall not list, and you shall not take a census of them among the people of Israel. But appoint the Levites over the tabernacle of the testimony, and over all its furnishing, and over all that belongs to it. They are to carry the tabernacle and all its furnishings, and they shall take care of it, and they shall camp around the tabernacle. When the tabernacle is to set out, the Levites shall take it down. And when the tabernacle is to be pitched, the Levites shall set it up. And if any outsider comes near, he shall be put to death. The people of Israel shall pitch their tents by their companies, each man in his own camp, and each man by his own standard. But the Levites shall camp around the tabernacle of the testimony, so that there may be no wrath on the congregation of the people of Israel. And the Levites shall keep guard over the tabernacle of the testimony. Thus did the people of Israel. They did according to all that the Lord commanded Moses. And so this last part is about Aaron's people, the Levites. He begins by pointing out what hopefully you would have picked up on your own. We've already mentioned it. The Levites are not listed among those 12 tribes. They've been replaced by one of Joseph's sons. This decision was not Moses's. Who made the decision? God made the decision. So God said it. Here's what they're going to do. Now, if you're the other tribes, you're thinking, okay, they're getting us ready to go to war. Why aren't these people going? He's got a specific function for them. Instead, they're going to be responsible for the tabernacle and its various furnishings that we talked about so long ago in Exodus. But he mentions not only the furnishings, but all the accoutrements, all the other pieces. So, for example, beyond all the heavy wood stuff and the stuff covered with gold, it's going to be all the rings for the curtains, right? Think of all the rings that had to be involved in hanging those curtains. They're responsible. This is your duty. And when we stop for the night, your duty is to camp closest to the tabernacle. You go, well, is that fair? They're safe in the middle of the camp. All these other guys are going to go to war. How is this right for all of us? Verse 51 probably takes some of that argument away from people pretty quick. The Levites are going to be the only ones who are allowed to set it up and to take it down. When I was in the Army, I'm sure when Rick was in the Marines, when our Air Force folks were in the Air Force, nobody wants to be the guy who's stuck setting up and tearing down every time you move. And they come look at you and you go, no, not me. Because you don't want to be that guy who has to do that, right? Pack that stuff up, load pallets. I probably have loaded a few pallets that were on Chuck's planes back in the day. That's a pain. It's got to be certain height. It's got to be certain size. It's got to be square. It's got to be... Can't the supply guys do this? Try to shuffle that stuff off all you could. These guys are responsible for all that stuff and to set it up or tear it down every day, no matter how many times they move. And remember how big the tabernacle was when we went through all that. And all the wood beams and all the heavy stuff. This is their duty. Probably by the end of it, some of them are going, can I go do this other thing with you guys? And the answer was no. It's their job to take it down or set it up. Plus, it's also their job. I don't know if you picked up on this there. It's also their job to execute anyone who tried to help in this way. This is not their job to protect it from outside attack. Their job is to keep their own people from helping and kill them. Now, this might remind you of the story of Uzzah, who was with David when the ark nearly fell off the cart. But Uzzah was a Levite. So even he broke the basic rules of what they could do. But their job is essentially to go to war with Israel if need be, to protect the purity of the tabernacle. That's taking pretty seriously the tent and these objects. Then the rest of Israel, according to verse 52, is going to come into the camp and set up their individual camps by tribe. You're going to be in tribal groups. All the people of Judah here, all the people of Reuben there, and so forth. And the way you recognize where your tribe was at was basically your battle flag, your banner. You set up by companies. right? He even used that word earlier in chapter 1. That's the language of army. That's the language of battle. Set up by your company, set up by your unit. So find your clan's flags, set up with your own people. When we get to it, next week or the week after, depending on how long it takes to get through chapter 2, Moses will then be given from God the specific locations for each company's place. It's going to be down to, you're on the northeast, you're on the northwest, you're in the south-southeast from the tabernacle. Everybody has a place, which again, having the census will help them properly distribute the forces around the tabernacle to protect it from attack. Tells them where to go. They don't have to guess where they're supposed to be. There's not going to be fighting over, oh, we're too close to the water or we're too far away from the water. God's going to give them all those specifics also. Verse 53 comes back and reiterates that it's the presence of the Levites who's not only going to protect the tabernacle from the Israelites. Doing that, the Levites are going to protect Israel from violating the rule given in verse 51. In other words, we're not just here to kill you. Don't touch it or I'll have to kill you. They're there to protect you so you never get to that point. Right? It's sort of like your job is to protect the electric fence around the cattle. Cattle figured out real quick and they don't do it. Who's going to touch it? The kid, right? Going to walk up and, is this thing really? Son, you're going to hate if you do that. And what does the little kid do? Bzz. The Israelites, don't touch it. It's not your job. Touch it, we have to kill you. But the Levites don't want to have to kill the Israelites. What do they want to do? Prevent it from ever having to take place in the first place. So by them protecting both the tabernacle looking inward to protect the tabernacle and protect the Israelites looking outward, what they're going to do is keep the rest of Israel from incurring the wrath of God for violating this basic commandment. This is not them being snotty going, this is our job, that's not yours, this is union work. It's them saying, look, God has set this up for your benefit, step away. And so they're there to protect the people. And then notice verse 54. It's going to reiterate some of what I've already taught about earlier tonight. Israel was what? Obedient. That's what we saw in Exodus. That's what we saw in Leviticus. They're going to be obedient to God's commands. And as we think about this time period, that's roughly chapter 1 to the middle of chapter 10, this is going to be the hallmark. God's going to tell them to do something, they're going to do it. Obedience is going to mark this time in chapters 1 to 10. On the other hand, most of you already know this story, if not all of us, once Israel leaves Sinai, walks away from this religious high moment, this is no longer going to be the case. Because what are they going to continually do repeatedly? Disobey. When we're close to God, we tend to be very obedient. When we walk away from God, we tend to not be. And of course, what does that then create? Even greater distance between us and God in the first place. And so the book is about, really, in one sense, ultimately, will they be obedient or will they not? If you don't know the story, if this is the first time you've heard it, imagine Moses' audience hearing it for the first time when he's writing it. They're going, man, we look pretty good. And you're going, you poor people. Because you know it's going to end. Spiritually, unfortunately, we see the same thing happen in church life, don't we? When they first get baptized, they're saved, they're excited. What happens over time? They cool off. We have a great Sunday like an Easter or a Christmas, and people are pumped. And 3 weeks later, we don't see half our people again. Why is it we can't keep, if you will, that spiritual momentum? What's that? It's the will of the flesh. We'd rather sin, which means we'd rather disobey. and we fall back into our old ways so easily. So we got a long road ahead of us. Big book, lots of details. But Debbie, that's roughly how we're going to handle those long numerical sections. If you want to handwrite them all out, more power to you. But we're not going to do that here. All right, let's go ahead and pray and prepare to leave. Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for this evening, for, Lord, the privilege it is to come to your house, to be with our people as well as your people. Lord, to fellowship and to pray together, to lift up our concerns and share them with one another. Pray, Lord, you be with those that have been mentioned, and so many more, Lord, that are on the hearts of the people here who didn't want to mention it because they didn't want to be that person. Remind them, Lord, that in your kingdom there is no that person. That, Lord, you know what we need before we ask. But, Lord, you also tell us to confess our needs to one to another. Help us, Lord, to be faithful to that. Lord, we pray for the study now of the book of Numbers as we enter in. That, Lord, that you would be with us on this long journey through the book. That, Lord, that you would continually remind us and show us what it is that you want us to see from your word as, Lord, you work in our lives to make us like your Son. And it's for all this we pray in his name. Amen.